The U.S. and Iran have signed a memorandum of understanding that includes major concessions from the Americans, among them unfreezing roughly billions of dollars in seized Iranian assets and committing to lifting sanctions on a future schedule as part of a final deal. The agreement also declares an immediate end to hostilities on all fronts, including Lebanon, and opens a 60-day window to negotiate the unresolved issues, chief among them what happens with Iran's nuclear program and its stockpile of enriched uranium. The deal doesn't grant Iran enriched uranium rights, but it does defer that question entirely to those final negotiations, which is a huge win for Iran. And this deal also notably leaves Iran jointly with Oman in charge of deciding the Strait of Hormuz's future administration, including fees, once the initial 60-day toll-free window ends. And then again, on Lebanon, there's already a dispute brewing. Iran says the ceasefire requires Israel to leave Lebanese territory, but U.S. officials say withdrawal isn't actually a condition of the deal, and Israel has said outright that it is not pulling out. So everyone is watching whether Israeli strikes on Lebanon continue, which they have. Today, Israel did kill 3 people, and whether that ends up unraveling the agreement entirely and what happens with the ongoing Israeli occupation of Lebanon. Joining us to discuss all of this is Navid Zarrinnal, a Tehran-based journalist. Navid, welcome to Breakthrough News Live.
Ronnie and Zoe, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us from Iran. And we want to get your take from Iran on this memorandum, which includes a lot of ground given to Iran, as I described. And Trump basically admitted at the G7 that the calculus changed because of oil. He said the U.S. would run out of reserves in about 4 weeks without opening the Strait of Hormuz. It's not even entirely clear whether he meant U.S. reserves or global ones, but either way, it is a remarkable admission that the Strait was Iran's biggest point of leverage. Now that we've reached this point, I'm curious, what are your general thoughts on this memorandum of understanding?
Yeah, so last night, I think it was around 8 p.m. Tehran time when I saw the Memorandum of Understanding from the American media. And at first, I thought it was fake news because I'd seen it on some Telegram channels and it was circulating. But then when the U.S. media published it, I understood that it's official. And I thought it was fake news because it is so favorable to Iran. And in a way, you could say that it's the opposite of what Trump wanted, because he wanted total surrender, unconditional surrender by Iran. But in this case, based on the text of the memorandum, it is a total surrender by the U.S. And as you mentioned, Rania, there are about 14 points. And out of those 14 points, the last 2, so points 13 and 14 are more procedural, but points 1 through 12, with the exception of points 9 and 10, the rest are heavily in Iran's favor. And they are getting things that they didn't have before the war, like you mentioned. So the freezing of Iranian assets, which are Iran's own money that were frozen in transit because of U.S. bullying and U.S. sanctions. But more importantly, I think the most important point is widespread sanctions relief. So oil sanctions are immediately being lifted, so Iran can sell its oil and derivatives of oil, so products that are derivatives of oil. And then after that, so after the 60 days, the text of the agreement says that the U.S. would also lift the primary and secondary sanctions on Iran. And that would be very important for Iran because the $300 billion investment fund that Iran is getting probably through U.S. regional allies, that is just enough to reconstruct and pay for the war damages. So in a way, it's the war reparations clause that is put in there through an investment fund. But then beyond that, the sanction relief would actually help Iran's economy thrive. But the problem here is that even though the text of the memorandum is heavily in Iran's favor, when it comes to the implementation, we are much more skeptical because the U.S. has a very bad record when it comes to dealing with Iran. So Trump withdrew from the JCPOA. Even during the last 2 years of the Obama presidency, he was not really implementing the deal, the Obama administration, minus some exceptions. And also Trump bombed Iran twice during negotiations. So some are saying that this is just to buy time and the U.S. will not implement it. And even if it does implement it, the chances of widespread and wide sanctions relief are, I think, pretty limited. And then there's also the problem of Israel, as you mentioned, that there is still attacking and bombing Lebanon. So most likely Israel will violate the first part of the first point of the memorandum, which is the ceasing of hostilities on all fronts, including Lebanon. And Lebanon is explicitly in the text of the agreement.
Well, Navid, I'm glad you mentioned that there is some skepticism regarding the deal and the implementation of it, because there have been reports saying that people inside Iran are unhappy with the deal and there's little trust with the U.S. What has been the general sentiment in the country for the last 24 hours since this text was released?
Yeah, so I think it was Sunday when they were talking about the memorandum coming out, even though we didn't have the text yet. But I went to the Foreign Ministry building, which is in central Tehran, near Imam Khomeini Square, and there were thousands of people there protesting, and they were protesting Ghalibaf and Araqchi, who are Iran's negotiation team representatives. And they were saying that we don't want a deal because the U.S. has attacked us. They have killed our leader. And they were worried because of the bad history and the lack of trust they have in the U.S. So they were protesting any deal with the U.S. Or rather, there were two currents, basically. So one current was protesting negotiations and a deal altogether. And the other current was saying that we don't want a bad deal. And then we also have to be very careful about dealing with the U.S. So I think in a way that was a way to put pressure on the officials not to come to a bad agreement with the U.S. So you have that, but you also have a lot of other people in the country who are very hopeful and happy about the deal because they understand that Iran's economy is impacted by prolonged fighting. A lot of the projects are put on hold. The internet was shut down for a long time. Now it's back on. But because of the disruptions to life and to the economy, a lot of people are hopeful. And this time they think it's different because they think that Iran has the leverage. And if the U.S. tries to cheat on the deal, Iran will close the Strait of Hormuz again. And they will, in a sense, force the U.S. to abide by most of its commitments in the Memorandum of Understanding.
Mm. And, to that end, I wanted to expand on, some tension maybe inside the country, because the reformists have generally pushed for compromise with the U.S., while the people referred to in U.S. media as hardliners, and I know you've challenged that term. I'm just using that as a placeholder, at least, because I'm not really sure how else to describe those who aren't the reformists. But regardless, the hardliners have basically run this war, right? And they did not capitulate, or their attitudes, ran this war. What does it mean for the reformists' future now that hard power, not concession, is what is producing these concessions from the Americans, including potential upcoming sanctions relief? And on that note, there's apparently also a tension inside the system right now between, again, I'm sorry for using this term, but between the hardliners and the sort of negotiating track. At least it's how it's being portrayed, with some street protests in Tehran chanting against even Araqchi and Ghalibaf by name, even though Ghalibaf himself is a former IRGC guy. And the IRGC's own institutional leadership did sign off on this through the Supreme National Security Council. But I guess my question with that is this, so what's going to happen with the reformists? And is this actually IRGC versus diplomats, or is it more a split between the people running the deal and an ideological faction that feels betrayed by it? Or is all of that too simplistic or not accurate?
Yes, I mean, even within the so-called hardliners that you could also call the pro-resistance camp or the pro-resistance camp, even within those people, you find someone like Ayatollah Mir Bagheri, who is considered one of the most hardline clerics in Iran. He was actually in support of the deal, and he tweeted saying that the negotiating team is different this time and everything is different this time, so just trust the negotiations. And also the new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, is supervising the negotiations very closely. So you even have that kind of mentality within the hardliners or the pro-resistance camp. But as I mentioned earlier, the people were coming to the streets, and also some other officials, whether they're members of parliament or clerics that have influence within the masses, they're saying that, no, we don't want to negotiate whatsoever because of what the U.S. has done, initiating a war, cheating on negotiations several times, and we should just keep fighting. So there's that. As I said, so you do have this kind of diversity within the hardline or the pro-resistance camp. But what you also have is that the reformists are, for the most part, losing the foreign policy narrative, because for the longest time they were saying that, just let us give concessions to the West, and then we can live a normal, happy, comfortable life with no sanctions. But then the experience of the past 11 years shows that that proved to be wrong. So the reformists have, in a way, lost the foreign policy narrative, and the resistance camp definitely has the upper hand when it comes to both the foreign policy narrative and the foreign policy decisions. But I would say generally right now there is a unity between the different camps when it comes to this war and basically defending Iran's interests and sovereignty against U.S. and Israeli aggression, and that has been reflected in the Memorandum of Understanding.
Well, I wanted to also get your take on the Lebanon angle here, because as was mentioned earlier, the Memorandum of Understanding declares in the first point an end to hostilities, including in Lebanon, and also protecting Lebanon's territorial integrity. But Israel has continued striking the south, and Israeli officials have repeated day after day that they refuse to withdraw. And of course, withdrawing troops from southern Lebanon would be like political suicide for Netanyahu or any Israeli official who would even get behind that. So they really have unless the U.S. comes down hard and basically, Trump uses actual real leverage to force this, the Israelis are going to keep violating it. So how do you think Iran responds if Israel keeps testing this, which we know they're going to keep testing this? I mean, just today they killed 3 people in southern Lebanon. Yesterday they killed 4. Could Iran actually walk away from the deal over continued strikes and occupation of Lebanon? Or do you think there's too much riding on the sanctions relief and other American concessions to Iran for that to be realistic?
No, it's a great question. And yes, my worry is that if it is just Israel violating the first point of the memorandum, Iran might not walk away from the deal. But if it is the several elements and several of the points being violated, such as U.S. Not offering proper and meaningful sanctions relief, then I think Iran would have an incentive to close the Strait of Hormuz again. And the worry here would be that Iran would lose some of the momentum, because for the past 100 days, the prices of oil had gone up, and the oil reserves were also running out. So they could have gone much higher than, I think they were about $90 to $95 before the memorandum. Now they are somewhere in the 70s. So they will lose some of that momentum, but I think they could regain it relatively quickly. But at the end of the day, yes, my worry is that Iran wouldn't just say retaliate against Israel or walk away from the deal if only the first point of the memorandum is violated, which is the ceasing of hostilities on all fronts. But what is important to note is that even if Iran does not walk away from the deal, they still support Lebanon and Hezbollah in other ways. And Iranian foreign policy is different than American foreign policy. So I think there's that famous American saying that's attributed to Henry Kissinger. I don't know if he actually said it, but you see it in American foreign policy mentality, which is, I think it is, it's fatal to be, it's dangerous to be an enemy of the U.S., but it's fatal to be a friend of the U.S., meaning that the U.S., depending on its realist interests, might betray its friends. But the Iranian foreign policy culture is different, because the idea is that if you have an allyship with someone, you have to really take care of them in hard times. And you see it even in the culture, even in Lebanon. If you go to someone's home and they're your good friend, then when they come to your home, there's that kind of reciprocity and there's that hospitality. And you see that hospitality, an extension of that hospitality from culture to politics. And in the foreign policy approach of Iran, they will take care of Lebanon and Hezbollah, even if they don't walk away from the deal.
Well, definitely not something that the U.S. foreign policy establishment is good at. And I think even with their European allies, they have shown not only will Europe take the mistreatment, but then they will line up to Trump to get whatever approval they want. But Navid, pivoting a little bit to another international event, the World Cup. The Iranian team has gotten a lot of attention. It's been kind of dominating a lot of the news surrounding the World Cup. Some of it joking with memes saying that the Iranian team is so good looking that they got Trump to sign the deal. But on a more serious element, is how they've been treated logistically. And so we know that in the lead up to the World Cup, there were threats to even their participation. A U.S. official tried to say that Italy should take Iran's spot. And then Iran sort of negotiated to be able to have their home base in Mexico. But this has meant that they fly in and out on the same day for matches. So they can't stay over in the United States. And, several members of their technical team have even been denied visas. A member of the team, the coach, called Iran the most oppressed team in the World Cup. And the team captain described a 5-hour journey for one game. What's your read on the politics surrounding the team in this tournament? And what does the treatment of the team kind of say about the state of what's happening right now with these talks?
Yeah, so as you're correctly saying in the premise of your question, the treatment of the Iranian national team has been atrocious. And it's not just Iran. I think the U.S. immigration policies and visa policies have really oppressed fans from so many different countries, especially global South countries. There's a story of the goalkeeper of Cape Verde, and his mom was not able to get a visa, but after he went viral, I think they granted a visa to his mother, and so many other stories of fans and even the Somali referee, for example, not being able to enter the U.S. But I think the Iranian coach is correct that the Iranian team has been the most oppressed. And they're dealing with very difficult situation where they have to fly back on the same day that their match ends, so they don't have much recovery time. And I mean, I'm sure you both fly a lot because you're journalists, and you get so exhausted even if you want to do journalistic work after you're jet lagged or you're flying a lot. And so let alone that, after coming from Asia to the Americas, they have to keep flying back and forth. So it's very difficult and it's very disgraceful. And also the double standards. I mean, FIFA is also guilty here because they're accommodating U.S. behavior. And the very fact that they allowed U.S. to host the competition to begin with, because there's a major double standard here, because when Russia invaded Ukraine, the next day they were kicked out of all international competitions. And this year, too, they couldn't compete for the World Cup. But the U.S. started a far more unjustified and unprovoked war against Iran, but they're hosting the competition, and this is the treatment that they're giving to the Iranian team. And also the other messed up factor are the pro-Pahlavi and the Zionist Persian fans in LA. So for whatever godforsaken reason, they had the bad fortune of also being in LA, where there are all these crazy Persian pro-Pahlavi Zionist opposition, and they were also trying to harass the team, booing the national anthem, and the people who were just bringing the actual Iranian flag that has been the Iranian flag for the past 47 years. But ultimately, a lot of that is noise. And FIFA, I think, was in this case, they were correct to ban the old monarchist flag from being in the stadium, even though their implementation was not that effective. But at the end of the day, I think that's a lot of noise. I mean, you're on the ground in the US, you're probably not in LA, but you probably know more than me. I was talking to friends who attended the New Zealand-Iran game, and they were telling me that actually most of the fans were normal fans, and they were just cheering the team. They were not booing the Iran national team. And they performed rather well against New Zealand, and I'm hoping that Belgium will be a tough game. Because Belgium, is a European team that is very strong. But they tied with Egypt, so we have hope that we can beat them. But the hope is that Iran, for the first time, gets out of the group stage and goes to the knockout stage. And if they go to the knockout stage, there's a chance that they play the U.S. Most likely, we will lose to the U.S. because they're the host and they have a slightly stronger team than Iran this time around. But yeah, I'm a football fan, so I'm really excited about all of it. But I definitely hate the way that the Iranian team has been treated. And even though there's so much international and media outrage, there hasn't really been an effective response from FIFA or from the U.S. government.
I mean, it's so outrageous, just so completely outrageous to witness. It's really disgraceful The Americans should be embarrassed because you're also just trying to put this team at a disadvantage to score political points as well. And just absurd ways, like these 5-hour security waits to get to from like Mexico to LA is ridiculous, but it's obviously being done just to make it harder for the Iranian team because of politics. Navid Zarrinnal, Tehran-based journalist, thank you so much for joining us. And also thank you for all of the analysis that you've been providing us with here at Breakthrough News throughout this war. You've been in Iran for the entire war. You've also covered it for us. You've written several pieces and done several videos for us. I encourage people to go to breakthroughnews.org and check out Navid's work there, and hope to have you back on soon as this plays out and develops more.
Thank you, guys.